You're listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, Singles Talk Radio channel, where we take a lighthearted and candid approach to discussions on the journey of relationship loss, divorce, parenting, being single, relationships building, dating, and yes, sex. Join our listeners and begin living your best life.
Hello, everyone. This is Rosalind Sadaka, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and our show is Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sadaka. And as many of you know, I am the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and I'm a divorce and co-parenting coach. And so the focus of many of our shows is about how we could help families get through divorce and move on to a happier outcome. And today's guest is going to be a wonderful resource for us to move in just that direction. Her name is Avani Ramnani, and she's the Director of Wealth Management and Financial Planning at Francis Financial in New York City. So welcome, Avani.
Thank you, Rosalind.
Avani, I'm sorry. Avani, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So I want to really focus on the connection between divorcing, having children, and the impact on the family in regard to the financial situation. So let's start by my asking you, how do you talk to children about the impact of divorce on a family's financial situation?
Yes, so divorce, as you know, has a huge impact on a family's finances. An income or a combination of incomes that was supporting one household now necessarily needs to support two households. Mm-hmm. And a survey by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that the household where the children reside, the average income of that household drops by an average of 40 to 45%, which is a shocking statistic. And as we know, a majority of these cases, households where children reside, is with the mother. Mm-hmm. So this is a very particularly concerning statistics. Now, how we can talk to children about the impact that the divorce is going to have on their financial situation, it's really, you have to start from thinking about providing the children with a sense of security around this situation. So even if the income of the household has dropped significantly, children essentially need to be made to feel secure about it. And so, depending on how old the children are, you would talk to them differently. So, for example, if your children are 8, 9, 10, perhaps, you would talk to them give them a simple explanation about the changes that might impact them. So any expenses around classes, for example, or lessons, talking about how, let's say, we might need to stop guitar lessons for a little bit, but that'll free up some time to play with your friends in the playground, go to the playground more. So, not sort of emphasizing on what the children lose, but helping them feel secure about what they'll gain. So little things like that make a huge impact on the well-being of the children. And mm-hmm. You could engage them in saying, okay, if you're cutting down on eating out, you could engage them on, say, giving them opportunities to help with dinner and making the dinner, once a week the dinner would be like fancy with some candles and things like that. So just giving them these types of opportunities to help them feel secure, get more time with the parents. For older children, you can have a more rich conversation. In fact, this could be used as an opportunity to teach children about budgeting and creating a plan and savings and spending. We love talking about how to bring in your value system when you're talking about these things. So, thinking about what is important to you as a family, what is important to them as kids, and focusing expenditure on things that are the most important. So, it's these types of opportunities. You could use this as an opportunity to teach children about handling money.
I really like what you're saying, and I think that's so important. One, to be very age appropriate in the conversations. Two, not to frighten the children, but to find a positive with some of the changes. So you're sort of reframing things so that what may be a lack of something can now be looked at as an opportunity for something new and different. And that's a wonderful way to talk about changes and new ways that our lifestyle is going to be different. And if parents have the right tone and they're not crying and saying, oh, this is terrible, this is dire, then the children will be able to adapt much more readily and move ahead with the plan. So that is really excellent. And I just wanted to add one point, and that is for adults never to confide adult information to children. So while you are going to be talking to them about things like we can't do guitar lessons for a while because our finances are changing at this time, we don't want to be talking about real adult information about finances, and that if Daddy doesn't do this, then we're really going to be screwed. And it's all because your mother spent so much money on jewelry, and move into that kind of drama. None of that, the children can't affect it or impact it in any way, and none of that is of their concern. It robs children of their childhood when you start confiding adult information. So there's a fine line between talking about finances and talking about the realities of not spending as much on toys for the holidays versus confiding details and your fears and anxieties about changes that may be happening. Do you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think just even to older children, keeping them away from the adult conversation is important, and really using this as an opportunity for moving towards the positive, showing the positive side of things, and teaching them a little bit more about how would you handle this money when you went to college, or when you're out on your own, you get your first job. They could even, older children could even get their first jobs, babysitting or tutoring or mowing lawns, and how that is exciting to have your own money to spend on things that you want to spend on. And also teaching about, not gathering stuff, but using it for things that are important to you.
Yes, and I love the fact that you pointed out that it's a great opportunity to talk about our values as a family and what's really important in life, which is love and connection and living in harmony, and not just about accumulating things. So it is an opportunity for some wonderful parental conversations. I know you talk about some of the financial traps immediately after divorce that can lead people into a rabbit hole, and I'd love you to share a little bit more about that.
There are unfortunately traps that people can fall into immediately after divorce. One of the biggest things we see our clients deal with is, and mostly our niche, our clients are mostly women who are going through divorce. So a lot of times they come in with a little bit of a guilt around the divorce. They always want to shield the children from the nastiness or from the conflict, but with that they feel like they need to provide things to their children and give them stuff so that they feel like their parents love them. And especially for parents who are in this difficult phase where children are going through so many changes. Now they have to think about living in two households potentially, and maybe moving back and forth between mom and dad. And parents tend to think, because they're going through this hardship, Let me give them whatever they ask for, so that they feel happy.
Mhm.
And what we know for sure is that you can't buy happiness, can't
Yes.
buy love, and it really sends a very wrong signal to a child. They learn to play one parent against the other, and not because they're malicious, but they're children. Their capability of thinking is only around that space. So it's really coming to this place, when you're dealing with these kinds of issues, coming to it from a calm, collected perspective and really seeing, would you do this had you not had a divorce? Would you do this? Do your values allow you to do this even in another time? And so that's one of the big traps that we see. We often see moms complaining about, their father is taking them on this Disney vacation, and spending a week at Disneyland, and all I can do is take them to their grandma and grandpa's house up in the mountains for a few days. And these types of imbalances, people tend to, when these types of imbalances exist, they tend to fall into the trap of trying to buy affection, trying to buy happiness.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's vitally important for parents to understand this, to be aware of it, and to not feel guilty if you are dealing with an ex who is trying to buy and uses material things as ways of earning more love and respect and admiration from the children. And it certainly does happen, but it doesn't mean you should put yourself into competition and try to do the same thing or feel like a loser because of that. Children are very aware and perceptive, and very often they can see through parents' behavior when it's not authentic and coming from a loving heart space. And there isn't a lot you can do to change if you are dealing with an ex who is going to play the game that way. So it's very important to keep an eye on not feeling guilty, and to remind your children that it's not their fault, and that everyone is doing their best and things are going to work out okay, because nothing is more important than the love you're providing to them. So thank you for those insights. I think that's critically important to remember. So let me ask you this. Is it better to keep the family home so that the children keep their sense of stability and security, or should we follow the financial equation and sell the home because both sides are needing those finances? I imagine that's a big issue that comes up very frequently for you.
It is, and it's a very difficult issue as well. There is always that emotional attachment to the home that the children are growing up in. And, it's true, a lot of your sense of security comes from your surroundings, and so parents tend to think about giving children that sense of stability and security by keeping the family home. However, there is always a balance that needs to be maintained, because keeping the home may financially have very negative impact on your long-term financial security of not just you, but your family's financial security, especially the mothers. If the mothers are in a position where their income is so low, reduced, and that it is likely to be low for a long time to come, so that doesn't allow for them to save money for their retirement. And think about a situation where you are in retirement and you have to depend on your children for support. And so parents sometimes tend to put themselves and their financial security at risk in the immediate moment. So we always bring this up. Obviously there is a lot that needs to be considered when you're making this decision. It's not as straightforward as, keep the home or sell the home. There are so many different issues that you need to look at, but the reality is, we advise clients to be practical and to look at that long-term picture. And maybe you don't need to sell the home right away. Maybe you can live in the home for a few years without impacting that long-term security. So there are lots of different things to keep in mind as you're going through making this decision.
Well, you've really opened the door to better understanding about how complex that decision is. And I want to remind our listeners that that's the advantage of working with a financial planner who specializes in divorce situations, because that's the level of advice you really need to get from someone who understands the short-term as well as the long-term impact of your divorce on everyone involved. And then you make a wise decision based on all of that information. So
that's a very good point. Very good point, Rosalind. One of the things that we often deal with when people come in as they're going through divorce is that they're not thinking about all these nuances, even for a home. Now, in New York City, we work with a lot of clients that have lived in their home. For example, in Brooklyn, they've lived in their home for 15, 20 years, and when they bought their home, it was very low value. They bought it at a point, and now that same home is worth millions of dollars. And so to think that, hey, I have all this money sitting in my home, so all I need to really do is make it to a point where my children don't need to be in this home anymore, and then I can sell it and take all this money and use it for retirement. So my home is my retirement. Unfortunately, when you go and sell it at that point, you have to think about all the taxes you need to pay, the capital gains taxes you need to pay. And there are so many other things that come into consideration. So it's not just if your home is worth $3 million, you're not walking away with $3 million, even if you don't have a mortgage.
Yeah.
There are so many different taxes to be considered, fees, and all the stuff that comes in. So those are the types of analyses that really need to be performed.
Yes, and obviously people in other parts of the country aren't dealing with homes on nearly that kind of pricing, but the same questions are there that have to be decided upon, and it's good to have the support of a professional who understands it. We're going to stop right now for a quick break, and I just want to remind everyone you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and the show is Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sadaka. We'll be right back.
Have you been getting enough lately? You know what I mean. Inspiration. Join us right here on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, the singles internet talk station, for all your inspiration.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Rosalind Sadaka with Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and we are talking to a wonderful wealth management expert, Avani Ramnani, and in New York City at Francis Financial. And she has been giving us wonderful insights about how finances fit into the divorce equation, especially when you are a family. And I wanted to give you an opportunity before we move ahead to let us know how we could find you. So if people want to contact you and get more insight, where do they find you?
So we are based in New York City. Our website is francisfinancial.com, and our phone number is 212-374-9008.
Wonderful.
And you can find us online or give us a call, and we're happy to chat. Even though we're based in New York City, we work with clients all over the U.S. and actually all over the world, and we're happy to support you in your situation.
Oh, so that's good to know. So regardless of where someone is located, they can access your expertise, and you do have a wealth of expertise. So I'm delighted that our listeners are getting a chance to connect with you and find out about you and your services. The next question, I think, is one that everyone doesn't think about immediately if they have younger children, but ultimately there's a huge issue that comes up about financing children's college education after divorce. And if Johnny is 5 and Susie is 8, are we talking about that as part of the divorce? Is that something that is only important if you have a teen? Can you enlighten us about that?
Yes, absolutely. College, obviously, when you're a parent, that's one thing you often think about on how to pay for college, even when you're a married couple.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation just gets more pronounced and difficult when you are going through a divorce and beyond that divorce, thinking about how is this going to be funded, who's going to pay for what and how much, and how are you going to keep track. So one thing I actually tell all my clients, whether they're going through divorce or are happily married, what I tell my clients is that your retirement savings should not take a back seat to saving for college. The reason I give them is that, when your child goes to college, they can get a loan for their education. But when you hit retirement and you don't have enough savings, no one's going to give you a loan for retirement.
So true.
And that's something that you really need to remember. And I'm not saying don't help your children with college. That is not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is savings are savings. You need to be making your savings as you go through life in order to support your life when you're not actually working. And come that time when you are retired and your child is at college, for example, then, or not, maybe they've finished their college and they have taken loans. But when you're in retirement and you have enough savings, at that point you can decide and even say, hey, I have enough, I have a little bit extra, I can help my child pay back these loans. And that's an option you can always take at that stage in life. So that's one thing I say right off the bat. In terms of financing children's education after a divorce, there is a lot of different approaches that you can take. There are special accounts that you can use to save for college. Some of the most popular ones are the 529 plans that are offered in each state by different companies. So those are very popular options. As someone going through divorce, they might say, hey, if they have enough resources, they'll say, we'll carve out these sums of money for education for these 2 children that we have. And they put it in the divorce agreement and put it in the 529 plan account. So some people deal with it that way. Some people have they have it in their divorce agreement on how much in ongoing contributions each spouse needs to make to these college savings. So that's another thing to think about. But overall, what we want to see when we create a financial plan for our clients, we want to make sure that saving for a college education does not negatively impact the long-term financial security of our clients.
Well, that's really important to understand. I'm so glad you emphasized it so well, because some people think that they would be forced or mandated to put a certain amount of money towards college education, and obviously if it doesn't fit the budget, then you have to prioritize yourself. So thank you for that insight. So if I just wanted to clarify, so that means not every family who divorces with children includes ways of addressing saving for college in a parenting plan, for example. That isn't mandatory on any level.
Not necessarily. Most matrimonial attorneys will bring up the issue, and people might put that in place, because if you do think about these things, if you have had conversations about funding children's education, college education, then those, whatever the agreements are, should be put into the divorce agreement or parenting agreement. And if there is no specific decision, if either of the parents have not brought it up, then you're sort of leaving it, outside the scope of this agreement. And then, it depending on how you feel about it, how either one of the parents feel about it, maybe just one of the parents finances it. So, it could lead to some conflict later. We have seen a lot of people address it in some way in their divorce agreements. We've seen matrimonial attorneys address college funding in some way, and what specific way they choose really depends on the parties and the agreement that they come to.
Wonderful. So let me ask you this, as we're getting close to the end of our conversation. If someone is divorcing and wants to bring in someone such as yourself as a financial advisor, do you come into communications with the attorney, or do you work with the family separately, and do you work with both mom and dad or individually? How is it worked out for you?
So for us specifically, we work with one of the parties, mostly the moms, and we work very closely with their attorneys. So we can have direct interaction with the client, or we can work directly with the attorney, or we can have both. We are open to any arrangement that the client and their attorney feels comfortable with. And the way we work with our clients who are going through divorce is in a two-step process. And as they're going through the divorce and looking at what that settlement proposal is, we create a financial plan, a forward-looking plan until the mom's age 95. And we look at what impact this settlement proposal is going to have on their long-term financial security. So that is more of how an attorney would work. We work on an hourly basis. And then once that divorce is finalized, we then help our client make sure that the division of assets is done properly. There are lots of little nuances that come into play when they're doing the division of assets. And then we help them on an ongoing basis managing their investments, as well as, updating their financial plans, helping them take those important financial decisions that come along as you go through life, and that we do on an ongoing basis as a client.
Well, that's excellent. As I said earlier on, I'm particularly impressed with your focus on the well-being of the family unit, and especially protecting mothers to help them protect their children, so that they have long-term security and peace of mind, which is so important, especially when you're going through a challenge as difficult as a divorce and its aftermath. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask you if you had just a quick takeaway for our listeners. What's the most important thing you want to remind them about before we end our call?
What I want to love for your listener to remember is that their children are beautiful parts of themselves, that they are, wonderful human beings that you are helping grow into good adults, good human beings, and that to spend time, which is the most that they want, to spend time to give them unconditional love, and to support them in growing their confidence, and do all that without having to worry about money. So if you need help with your finances, go find an advisor, ideally a fee-only financial advisor who will keep your best interest ahead of theirs and help you do all the wonderful things that you want to do for yourself and your children and your family.
That's wonderful advice. I thank you so much. Your information has been really very valuable for all of our listeners. We've been talking to Avani Ramnani. She is the Director of Wealth Management at Francis Financial. They're based in New York City, but they work with people all over the world. And if you go to francisfinancial.com, you can access their website and learn more about contacting Avani and all the other services they provide. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you. Likewise, Rosalind.
And I want to thank all of our listeners. You've been listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This is Rosalind Sadaka with Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living. And if you're interested in getting other insight about divorcing as a parent, then visit childcentereddivorce.com for coaching services, for digital programs, e-courses, and other resources, interviews, and information to help you before, during, and long after divorce. Look forward to talking with you again in the future. Bye-bye for now.
You're listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, Singles Talk Radio Channel, where we take a lighthearted and candid approach to discussions on the journey of relationship loss, divorce, parenting, being single, relationships building, dating, and yes, sex. Join our listeners and begin living your best life.